Dear heads on the wall, dear heads on the wall, always watching you. Hey! Dear heads on the wall, dear heads on the wall, always watching you. Dear hunter shot Bambi, Bambi took the fall, dear heads on the wall, always watching you. Yeah. You're not paranoid if they're out to get you. You're not paranoid if they're out to get you.
Is March 21st. It is Saturday. And to my partial surprise, I'm out today. I actually had to start the day by working. And depending on how that wrapped up in a given amount of time was going to dictate whether I was going to be out today or tomorrow, but things worked out for the better, and here I am. The process today, I don't really have an agenda because, like I said, I was working for the last 4 hours and got done as soon as I was going to literally go out, so the timing was near perfect. I'm not going to complain about that. It is around 40 degrees today. We have overcast conditions. The snow is largely gone, so tracking in the snow is not really a possibility. So we're going to go in, look around, and listen, and trying to think if there's anything else on my mind regarding Bigfoot related stuff. I don't want to go off on a long political rant like I did last week, because once you start, it's hard to stop. And I'm probably not the only one with that, but rather than do that, we're going to get going. We're going to have a look around, and we'll see what we find. We are in the Tribog area in Connecticut. I'm also pondering when I'm going to start getting up to Vermont, but I've been burnt too many times when I get up this time of year. It's lovely down here, but you go up there and you still have 2 feet of snow and a snowpack, and you can't really get in anywhere, given that the gates aren't open until at least another month. So that's still a couple of weeks out. So let's get going, see what we find, and that'll be that. Other than, no offense to Buckeye State residents, but the Salt Fork area is the most stomped over East Coast Bigfooting area ever. And probably overly so. Anyway, let's have a look at the pond, because the ice remains, despite the fact we had 2 days of near 80-degree weather in the recent past. As you notice, the snow is not exactly what it once was. That took a big hit. So we have, and you can see both the beaver lodges again. Again, that one was overrun last year by I'm just going to call them a full-on tribe of otters. So I don't know if the beavers got run out, or I don't know how that works. I don't know what the neighborly relations between beavers and otters are. But otters being predators of a sort, I could see where they might try to run them off and take over the nest. There are other animals out there in the animal kingdom that'll do such things. I have decided, no offense to Mike Familitant, but due to some financial reasons, I can't attend his camping trip. I wish him well. For the sake of being professional in a Bigfooting thing, despite the information that you shared with me, Mike, that will stay with me. Because having been out in the field and having had, there's something to discuss, having had people come in to intrude upon your outing. If nothing else, it basically ruins the neutrality of the area. And I know there are entitled little newbies out there that want to say, well, why can't we come too? Because if it's not a coordinated effort, the fact of the matter is you got two groups out there that, for all you know, are doing dueling banjos when they're doing wood knocks or something. And if you know somebody's out there and you're not in their outing, stay the fuck out. Go somewhere else. This has been the etiquette in the community forever and a day. And if you're some noob that doesn't get it, God forbid you're entitled, boo-hoo. And I'm addressing this to one person who inspired that comment and continues to, but I will say this, and I won't mention their name, I'll be nice, but I will say this much. When I started out, way back when, I found the areas I did by doing the legwork myself, and there's no goddamn reason why you can't either. Nobody owes you shit, and you can go out and not be spoon-fed, and you'll probably stay longer in the subject if you do it that way. But yeah, that's the thing. You kind of have to put some work in. Also, I heard something snap over there, so I may or may not be alone in here. There are no people I'm aware of, but you may have something in here clipping around. Probably just a deer or something, but last time I heard something in this time of year when you still had crunchy snow on the ground, I heard something, and you had that proverbial thing where you're trying to match steps and then you stop and you hear a crunch that's out of sync with your own, so you know it's not you. Turned out to be nothing more than a sizable buck, but it was a deer. And 9 times out of 10, that's what it is. Not everything is Bigfoot, and anyone who tells you that it is probably lying. Or overly eager to run into one, and everything then becomes Bigfoot because, you know, I guess that's mud and not poo, but hold on. That is the second time I've heard something. The other thing I'm going to look out for is because over that way, like literally every other week, there's a bull moose who comes through and goes that way. I haven't seen him lately, but he has the same trackway that he leaves in the snow, so he apparently is a creature of habit. I don't know what he goes from over there to somewhere across the way over there, probably that open area in there to do grazing or something, but other than that, the only sign of wildlife we've had today, I came in here and there was an agitated hawk making a racket and circling over, but that he seems to have gotten over it and moved on as well. And for some, I know that my attitude towards that seems to be harsh, but again, we did the legwork back then and expect other people to come up doing the same way. Not that everybody in the younger generation is doing that. There are a few people out there who are doing their own work and quite honestly have a good solid head on their shoulders, examples being I forget her first name, but the young lady that does the forest floor thing seems to have a good head on her shoulders, as well as the guy who runs Adirondack Bigfoot. Sorry, was it Adirondack Bigfoot? The guy who is his first name is Mike, and we've been out in the field, so if he hears me say that, I'm mentioning him. Younger guy, good guy, solid head on his shoulders for the subject, and unless you're a woo person, in which case, you know, you're going to go hunting. You're on a snipe hunt anyway, as far as I'm concerned, but that's on you. And if you hear that and that offends you, there's this thing that adults do, and you really could learn it these days a lot more. That is, agree to disagree and move on with your day. Otherwise, you're toxic like that big burl on that tree over there. So, kind of staying behind a little bit low. I'm looking around because every now and then I hear a crunch, like there's something around here. Keeping a polite distance, but and obviously knows I'm here because I'm yapping. But interestingly enough, also not immediately vacating the area, which means it could possibly be a bear. It is 40, so it's not that cold. Which isn't necessarily that big a deal as long as you know where the bear is and what the bear is doing. I've probably been in relatively close proximity to a bear that was doing basically bear stuff, and because they have an incredible sense of smell, knew I was there and didn't seem really that concerned about it. So more a matter of, you go that way, I go this way, and nobody has to have any sense of conflict about it. You just which is one of the things I will do to vet somebody before I go out in the woods with them, because there is, I'm not going to mention his name again, but a person who I know who, whenever the question of a bear came up, out came the bear mace, and he was willing to go chasing after it, like he's going to run up to the thing and give it a nice dose of bear mace, when the thing's probably just walking by minding its own business. Because that, folks, is how bear attacks happen. An otherwise mellow black bear walking by, literally minding his own business, and you come up and you're attacking him. You're the aggressor, you get mauled, and you deserve it. Because 99% of all bear attacks I've ever read about, sorry not sorry, are people doing dumb shit to antagonize the bear, and therefore my sympathies for their maulings are, hopefully you didn't die, because frankly, this is going to sound harsh, but if you die, you don't learn anything. But anyway, we're going to make our way over here and bop around, see if we find any signs of life. Allowing for periods of non-vocal hood, because I want to not, despite the fact you look around, you don't see any wildlife around here. It is also fairly open, minus the undergrowth factor, but excuse me, if you look for the signs, there is signs of every major larger fauna type in here. What I need to do and remember to do is come in here at night one night, if I can find safe locations, and set up some trail cams to see what's wandering around here at night. Because number one, there has been weirdness in this area. Some of the trees in here are delightfully weird, kind of like a Ichabod Crane's version of like a tour of the forests of Connecticut. Kind of like those weird, like spooky forests. We have some unique woods like that, and this stretch is part of that. But rather than ramble, I'm going to probably take a segment break, and I am going to listen in more so than yap. So that being said, we'll be back in a bit. And the reason we're back is just some interesting stuff that has been caused by the crazy wind that comes through here on occasion. Many would be tempted to call this an X, but that could be from up there. It is deadfall. And again, just to drive the point home, probably some people get grumpy with, but when you see an object that could be a stick structure, you notice what I'm doing. I'm not just looking at it from one angle. I kind of walk around. And you get the 360 view, because that will determine if it's something interesting or not. And a lot of people, I haven't seen this actually recently, so maybe it's getting better, but people in the past, there's been certain chronic culprits that just want to pretend something, because they look at it. There's one particular picture of a stump that's been around for years, and people have examined it in night vision, black and white. They have thermal imaged the damn thing, and they try to say it's Bigfoot. They try to say it's a Bigfoot turning into a rock. I've heard some absolutely entertaining speculations on this thing. But if that's Bigfoot, then guess what? That's Bigfoot too. And so is that one over there. Mystery solved. I can go home now. Guys, it's a fucking stump. Really? Seriously? Are you that stupid? Please don't be that stupid. That gets very tiresome. I guess what I'm trying to say from the curmudgeonly standpoint of a multiple decade veteran of this subject is I've kind of gotten to a point where I really just give zero bleeps about somebody's feelings. I mean, when they come to the other side of the fence on this, and they just there's a lot of people out there who are and these are people in the woo groups, yes, and they will be the believers, BLEEVERS, who you have to respect everybody's opinion. No, I don't. If your opinion is that fucking brain dead stupid, no, I don't. If you're a mind numbing cretin, that's my mind. Not my mind is numb. I have brain freeze, and I don't have to respect you because you're that delusional and or ignorant and or stupid. You can stop anytime you want. The Mike perspective of Bigfoot is that if it's out there and it is a flesh and blood, corporeal thing that needs to freaking sleep and eat and drink and shit and fuck in order to be living, and therefore it is something quantifiable and provable. And if you are of the opinion it is any other thing out there, from Niflheimers to an alien to a Indian spirit animal, then I know you don't want to hear this, but the burden of proof for that claim is on you. And before you say anything, yes it is. And that mindset is exactly why I am not more into the UFO thing, because quite frankly, in the days of Project Blue Book, when you actually had more compelling encounter stories with aliens and things like that, it was an interesting subject. But ever since the New Age bullshit cult has come in and taken over the subject largely, it's been something I just really don't want to waste my time on. Do I think that UAPs are out there and UFOs are out there? There's undoubtedly things flying through the air that are not readily identified, and there are objects. So yes, obviously. Do I think there are aliens out there? The universe is just too goddamn big for there not to be. Are they all freaking gray and freaking bubble-headed fetus stealers because the internet says so? They come from Zeta Reticuli? Prove it. Is the government ever going to admit that? Fuck no. The only time the government talks about aliens is when you should be asking what else is going on you're trying to distract us from. Like, I don't know, somebody's files, or a certain war that's going on that didn't need to, or something. I know there are going to be people out there that say, I have delved into politics, so I'm going to finish my thought because I don't like not doing that. And this is not a woke perspective, so shut up. Regarding that, reality number one, Iran was never going to be on our Christmas card list. So there's that reality. Second reality, were they an imminent threat to the United States of America? Currently, right now? No. Whether or not they are an imminent threat to Israel is an Israeli problem. I am saying that it popped in my head because the other day I saw a press conference from a certain Mr. Netanyahu, and this guy was basically telling the American people regarding gas prices and all that, suck it up. Because, and I'm quoting here more than I'm not, when it comes to the Jews, and I am not remotely anti-Semitic, so calm the fuck down, I'm making a point. When it comes to them, do I have to remind you the last 80 years? Like, this guy has the fucking balls to freaking guilt trip America. I'd like to hear him answer this question. When it came back to those 80 years and these same very Jews were liberated from the concentration camps, who did that? Would that be A, the Mossad, or B, the United States mother effing military and its allies? So who the fuck are you to freaking guilt trip us? How dare you? Unpopular opinion with some, maybe, but Israel on its best day, though they may not be an enemy, are an ally of convenience that clearly do have their own agenda. And a shitload of dirt on every American politician on both sides of the political aisle to make sure that we do what they want, because corruption. That being said, I'm going to change subjects and I'm going to take a break because I don't want to have every freaking goddamn video I make start turning into a political rant, because it's just too easy. So again, we will be back. We are entering into a new segment of the forest. We were here during the winter, but because there was a whole lot of snow there and now there's not, it's going to look different. Where we are, that's nice, dickhead. Even as I'm saying we're moving in, there's like some jackass that has to leave that there. Okay, there's wildlife. There's a chickadee or something up there. Anyway, some kind of chickadee. The third of the tribogs is right there, so we're kind of like paralleling that on the side before we jump the stream. And we're just for variety, we're staying up here today. Like I said, I was working early in the morning, so I didn't come out here with a hard and fast game plan. Kind of just poking around to see what we find. And I don't know if that's an early slop hunter slash poacher, because I have run into poachers out here. But you know what, aside from the brazen litter of that, you know what the really bad problem with that is? And some people may get pissed at me, but you know, fuck you if you do. That bottle is indicative of cheap beer. Not only are you a litter bug, you are basically a freaking bumpkin of beer consumption, which is not acceptable. Yes, Mike is a beer snob. Suck it up. I have a couple of opinions that people probably don't like much. Probably the last one too, but I just got pissed off because, you know, the blind loyalty to the... I'm not getting into politics. Stop. We're done. Moving on. We're going to focus on weaving through here and do that instead. Not what the channel's about, and we're not going to get gamed that way. Nor am I aware of the forest. I don't need that much camouflage. So what we've accomplished over the course of the winter in regard to this particular large wetland, which is probably the size of 2, maybe 3 football fields, which is pretty sizable as Connecticut goes anyway. This end is swampy. I'm not going to call it like a full mangrove, but undergrowth and swampy, water-filled hip wader territory if it doesn't get deeper, and from personal experience, sometimes it does. To way over on the far end, I'm deciding if I want to go over that far, but basically it is more of a grassy meadow over there. So if we're going to have any night op out here, and anyone who is relatively local who's up for such a thing and doesn't mind a little bit of a hike into the woodwork, so to speak, in the dark, probably a pretty good area to do it. You're pretty far from things. You saw on a map where this is, despite that jackass and his cheap ass crappy beer fucking tastes. Really do have an opinion there, don't I? Anyway, if I remember, I'm going to pack that out on the way out, just because that's just it really just shows the worst kind of person out in the woods, though, because you're too lazy to hike out your garbage, and you're drinking garbage beer, which just goes to show what kind of a piece of crap you really are. If I seem a little more freaking grumpy than normal, this is what happens when you get me up earlier than I want to be, and you make me work and do a chore towards before I'm able to get out into the woods, because then I'm like overly caffeinated and frankly punchy as a result. So, hey, look, it's snow. Cool. Look for tracks. Don't see anything really. It's that snow cone kind of consistency, though. I guess I'd be curious if people like watch this for like Bigfoot content, or they just enjoy my my comical banter as I'm out here yapping to myself. In the winter, I was kind of like, I was saying things about having a backtrack, but really, honestly, if you can see the water line over there, you're pretty much paralleling a big freaking long beaver meadow pond thing, depending on what part of it you're in. Part of it is actual water, but not consistently, and I'm going tentatively because I don't want to get jabbed in the eye with that, but also moss-covered rocks can be slippery, so you kind of step with care. What's the most easy way out of this? And shift through there. Go over that, crunch, crunch, and we're out. Okay. Moving on. What do we got over here? Sorry about the hucking. It's also the beginnings of allergy season, being spring. Deer poo. More deer poo. You want some woodsy content? This actually would be a good spot for a hammock listening post in the middle of the night too, because or even tenting, because the soft pine needles kind of like level off any kind of other crappy features the ground might have from past experience. Not everything in this video is negative. I've been told by certain people that I'm overly negative. I would argue that I have the tendency to make a point by way of shooting from the hip, and that's not the cut for everybody's jib. So everyone's got their own jib. Enjoy your jib. I got mine. So again, back in the winter, I came across probably a forager's little stash of pine cones. I kind of got curious, what are they doing with that? I saw a guy online who was basically using them to burn in his wood stove, and apparently they burn really well. Not long, but they burn pretty well. So if you have a gazillion of them in a big basket, you got a nice fire going for a while. So next time I am camping and you got a liberal supply of those, I'll remember that. One more natural resource out here that makes for decent tinder. I believe that's a moose track. The thing is, I'll look in the snow over there to see if our friend maybe gave us a more confirmable one, but I'm not seeing any. Because also from personal experience, at least in the Vermont area, you can be on the hottest, driest day in the middle of Vermont, and every single bit of deadfall out there is still soaking wet. Without fail. Still soaking wet. So anything that accelerates the starting process, although granted, you can still just go to the neighborhood store and get treated wood, which lights pretty quick. But for those of the purists out there that like to do the bushcraft thing and start a fire that way, that will save you some grief. But something else that's good for tinder, you're looking at it right there. You don't see them everywhere, but if you chip these things off, also good tinder. If I remember the guy's video though, and this may be particular to the species of pine cones in his neck of the woods, I say that because I think he was in the Scottish Highlands. He wasn't. He was not in the U.S. of A. He was. His accent and his commentary lead me to believe he was somewhere in Scotland. And he said something about you have to dry them out first, and then the scales open up. These things will open up as part of that, and then that's when they're like optimal to use as fire tinder. Hey, look, more deer poo. Oh, crazy, huh? And it's almost like I'm following a half-assed game trail. And the bane of somebody's existence this time of year is something I'm about to show you. After all the other snow's melted, you have this guy hiding down there, secretly surviving halfway into June because he never gets any sun, just defying the entire changing of the season plan, and darn you for doing so. I'm going to take a segment break in a minute because I'm like that. This, if I'm not already rambling, I'm damn close to rambling. But also kind of lending field commentaries when I make my way through this swampy little semi-waterlogged area, which probably is usually much worse. I don't think we had any rain in the last. When did we have our last rain? Not in the last 72 hours anyway, which maybe isn't really all that much, but swampy. Yeah, we're going to take a break and we're going to make our way over that way, and mainly just because the wetland kind of curves that way, and see what we see. As always, we'll be back in a bit. And I'm going to kind of go through this clearing real quick, and then I'm going to point something out. If it's as visible as it just was. Basically, I was just referring to an area for a night op. And way through there, on the other side of this thing, is there's a nice view of that, is a grassy meadow where you can see out a ways, and you can throw a bunch of night vision deer out there in the middle of the night. This is an area basically that is right along the Connecticut-Massachusetts border, and realistically where we are is probably about as far deep into this collective forest area as we're going to get, reasonably speaking. And you get in here and find another spot like the one we were just walking through with the soft pine needle stuff. It's good for relative quiet. It's also good for like a hammocking listening post or something where you want to just like have access to that, put some trail cams out or something and see what wanders through, because this area is actually pretty decent habitat. The reason I want to go with trail cams though is if you notice there's a lot of wind, and wind actually does cover up a fair amount of noise. It's also interesting the contrast in the shadow play you get when the sun comes up versus the partly cloudy, I guess is what a weatherman would call it. And nice little tree break there. That's a tree break, nothing special. I know some people out there want to say Bigfoot does all of this stuff, but he might not be the artiste you think he is, or she is, for the fairness of that. Anyway, we start working our way back this way, and kind of have to weave through here because you have a lot of that, and there's you can get back, but you kind of have to do a little angling to do so. And despite my grumpy demeanor, I actually am in a fairly decent mood considering that I got work done and got my chores out of the way so I could still come out and play in the woods. Yeah, like I said before, when you run into wind damage like that, and then it ends up along there, You have to kind of pay attention to that on a windy day. Today's not as windy as some days have been, but there are days when you listen to the creaks in the trees carefully, because this, I ought to just like give this name, like give it like a widowmaker kind of connotation, because there is a lot of that in here. Things like this, I've literally seen trees like this come down in real time, and if that landed on you, you are no longer with us. That's how big these things are in some cases. Hopefully you have your wits about you and you're not some dumb individual with like headphones on and you don't hear the creaking when you hear that little, where the creaking goes from a creaking to a snapping sound, and you'll look up to see if you have to run or not. Fatal mistake that is. That's how you know it's getting warmer out, because I just walked through a spider web. It will never fail to amaze me the talent that spiders have for laying the center mass of a spider web directly where your nose is, at that level when you walk through it, because you get the maximum amount in your face. Just, they have a talent for that. They really do. Yeah, okay, we're good. We learned our lesson from the earlier week, and I'm not going to repeat that. We're just going to kind of find the driest route through this water, this puddled area. I'll just call it puddled, which looked completely different during the course of the winter when you had snow and ice. And I'm just going to blast through this. Move. But I'm also waiting for my second lack of wind, because I've been up since like 6:30 in the morning, and I got overly caffeinated in order to get the job done, and I'm waiting for that to wear off and the yawns to begin, which is the downside of that cycle. Hello. Unless, of course, I run into some unexpected neighbor. You never can tell. Well, you can, but you know what I mean. And there was a gentleman who commented on my previous camera, the fishbowl one, and hopefully this one is marginally better, but again, I still have a I'm not able to just go out and buy a $2,000 8K camera to get the best at this point, so I am making do with a police body cam, because it has the best overall feature set for the exercise. We're passing our fire tender again. If you're asking yourself, you're probably not, but if you are asking yourself if it is that specific a path that I'm following, the answer is yes. If you were to match this up with the snow tracks I left in the winter, we're probably within 5 or 10 feet of that. But it's easier moving around here now, because here's the other area I was talking about, the Pine Needle area. Just kind of have to watch where you step by way of the deer poo that's sporadically through here. Anyway, I'm going to take a segment break and make my way covering some ground. And again, we'll be back in a bit.